what network effects have you sort of seen, and how do you articulate those to investors or to clients?
When you think about what investment bankers represent in this ecosystem, their credibility, expertise, relational capital to effectively engage in market-making activities and unite capital seekers with capital allocators. When you bring on an investment bank into Finalis, they're bringing their deal flow. There are approximately 2,000 active deals on the Finalis platform today. Average deal size is around $75 million.
How do you listen to the customer, detect what needs to be built, and how do you know when to change your mind? How do you make that delineation?
Look at the other AI companies that are innovating for financial services. Many of those businesses are automating the production of things like investment banking artifacts. But if you were to talk to a senior managing director of a bank, their number one pain point is not the manufacturing of investment banking artifacts. It's about engaging in this market-making activity, getting access to better data so that they can make more informed decisions. This outside-in view puts us in a position of driving significant value where it's most impactful.
Federico, nice to see you. We're here in San Francisco. Welcome to Under the Banyan Tree. How's your day going?
Under the Banyan Tree. I love that. That's a great motto. I'm doing very well. How are you, Sam?
Good. I have to ask, did you take a Waymo here or did you drive?
I drove here. I braved the Golden Gate Bridge and crossed into San Francisco from Marin, where I live and work. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you biked across that bridge or?
I have biked across that bridge. I've run across that bridge.
Okay.
It's a pretty special place.
Yeah, I agree. I used to live in the Marine. I live in New York now, and I've biked across that. It was a little bit scary, but
I don't think we ever bonded over.
Yeah.
So you lived in Marin?
The Marina. Sorry.
Oh, in the Marina.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But I've been to Marin, and I love it out there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, great to connect with you. For the listeners' context, Banyan's AI Fund 1 is proudly invested in you. We've been working with you for a few months now. I'll flip it to you for an introduction, but on our side, we made this investment because this is a $13 trillion market you're operating in, building the AI.
At least, yeah.
At the minimum, right? Like building this AI system of record for compliance.
Yeah.
And it was just incredible to see your traction. One of the fastest growing investment banks in history, one of the largest active data sets that's living and breathing in compliance.
Yeah.
So that's why we made the investment, because you're owning arguably the most important part of being a banker, which is not getting in trouble and remaining compliant. Because if you have errors there, everything else underneath you kind of falls apart. But I'll flip it to you for like an introduction to yourself and Finalis, and we can jump in.
Yeah, so my story is that I'm a recovering big law deal attorney. Spent a number of years in the San Francisco office of a large corporate law firm doing middle market tech buyouts for private equity funds. Really your usual suspects out here in the Bay Area, you know, folks like Silver Lake, Francisco, Golden Gate, Huntsman Gate, and many others. Did deals for a while and realized over the course of my career that there was a central irony to my day-to-day job, which was that I was working on all these amazing tech company buyouts on behalf of these financial sponsors, but I was leveraging a 40-year-old tech stack to get the deals executed. And to me, that made no sense. And I guess it fueled a kind of unhealthy obsession around the opportunity in driving digital transformation into how we actually execute on private market deals. This huge asset class that is still dealing with analog technology across the entire stack, basically. And so ultimately, I decided to leave the firm to launch Finalis. And what Finalis is doing, as you mentioned, is building the AI system of record for private capital. We do that in an incredibly unique way, though, which is by building regulatory infrastructure that's designed to scale like software. And so today, Finalis is proud to support close to 900 investment bankers, placement agents, and independent M&A advisors operating in 24 different countries. And the way that we support them is as their broker-dealer of record. And because of that regulatory designation, Finalis is mandated to capture digital communications that the banker is sending and receiving, as well as deal documents, definitive closing documents relating to transactions. And what that does in the aggregate is it creates effectively an incredibly large data moat of first-party data that also gives us real-time visibility into the entire private markets transaction lifecycle, from origination all the way through to closure. And that is incredibly unique in this ecosystem, perhaps unmatched except by the largest monolithic investment banks in the world. Right. Except that in the case of Finalis, it is reverse engineered and purpose built to capture that data to then derive meaningful use out of that data. And so we launched this business in early COVID. And what was interesting about launching in that time period is that it was around that time that you started to see more and more knowledge workers, whether it was lawyers, investment bankers, tax advisors, management consultants, start to leave those firms to become their own firms, right? And in many ways, this trend has been accelerated by AI and the immense opportunity that exists for you to be a one-person consulting operation or to be a one-person investment bank. And we were observing that trend, and so we came out to market with this solution of being the first truly in the cloud regulatory infrastructure as a service. And that ended up being kind of this critical wedge where we've enabled that scalability. And ultimately, from a league table perspective, based on our performance last quarter, you would see that Finalis became the 14th largest investment bank in the US.
Congratulations.
And the 21st largest globally, except that obviously we don't employ any investment bankers. Investment bankers are actually our customers, and we're serving them through the platform solution. And now that we've proven this critical mass of bankers, deal flow, and data, there's a tremendous opportunity to layer AI on top of it to unlock significant additional value beyond just the compliance value proposition.
Wow. Congratulations
Thank
again.
you.
So 14th largest in the United States.
In terms of number of closed deals, yeah.
Yep. And you said, and globally, you said
21st.
Yeah. So I think that listeners could probably try to understand that. But I mean, like in terms of numbers, that's in the billions of volume, right, of transactions a year. Like, I mean, talk like, what does that look like to be 14th?
Yeah. So to be clear, that's in terms of number of closed deals. From a volumes perspective, we would definitely be lower. Since we launched the platform, we've closed about 22 billion in transaction volumes. And so very meaningful volumes. But it is important to bear in mind that this trend that we're seeing around the fragmentation of the private capital markets, it's certainly been playing out among the intermediaries who we support. But that fragmentation is also a reflection of the fact that most of the growth in the private capital markets are within small transactions. The average deal size that Finalis supports on its platform is around $75 million.
Right.
There are 100 million companies in the world today that are valued between $5 and $50 million. So there's a tremendous market out there, opportunity as it relates to lower middle market businesses. And we are uniquely positioning ourselves to support those types of transactions.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different points I want to touch on, but you know, even in my small asset class wide, it's a small world of VC compared to other asset classes that are much larger, but the majority of M&A is under $500 million. So even the majority of deals would happen under that number, for example.
You know, I spend a lot of time, like you do, between the San Francisco Bay Area and Manhattan. And I oftentimes feel that I have to remind my friends in these places that there is a whole universe of deal flow that happens off Silicon Valley and off Wall Street.
Right. And it's actually much larger. Yeah.
I remember one of the largest deals we worked on early on in the business was the sale of a family-owned concrete and pavement business. And it was, I think, a really nice reminder of the fact that there's amazing deals to be had anywhere. There's over $3.7 trillion of corporate value that is trading hands as the baby boomers retire over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. We see those deals all the time at Finalis. And in the aggregate, it presents a massive opportunity because the large investment banks are not positioned to support those smaller transactions.
Right. And they maybe don't even want to for numerous reasons. Like it's hard to do, it's tedious, it could be error prone, and maybe the opportunity it just naturally sort of made sense for someone to enter like Finalis and take advantage of that.
Yeah, and in many ways, just following the tailwinds that are playing out in real time in this market.
Macro, right? More and more bankers going out on their own, AI enabling better kind of abilities to reach further, faster, move quicker. And like COVID hit, yeah, a lot of bankers may have said, hey, you know what, I want to go out on my own, and AI has just accelerated that. I wanted to ask you this too, and sort of this concept of AI native, right? Like I'm the founder, general partner of Banyan AI Fund One. We finally announced the final close. You're one of our hallmark companies in the fund. And to me, it's like AI native means you build with state of the art AI advancements from day zero. But Finalis is in that equation, but in a really special way, in my view, because in some specific scenarios, you need to actually have been prepared for many years for the AI revolution.
Yes.
Building the plumbing, the data pipelines, the workflow ownership. And that is, in my view, exactly what Finalis had done. Is I think had you just launched today in this world, you would have been so behind on building all of the things leading up to being prepared for state-of-the-art AI advancements, the Gen AI,
Yep.
state-of-the-art models. So, I mean, help listeners understand that. I mean, that's what to me was such a phenomenal part of this opportunity to back you and invest, was the groundwork being laid that there would be no shortcut on that, and earning that trust, access over the data, access over the workflows, and just the technical infrastructure to handle so many transactions, like top 14 in the United States. I mean, talk about that.
You know, you can say the word infrastructure broadly, because it isn't just about software infrastructure. It's things as tedious and basic as standard operating procedures, decision trees, right? These are the types of those are the types of elements that make up ultimately what is scalable regulatory infrastructure. It's incredibly tedious because fundamentally what we had to do was reverse engineer industry norms into codified practices that therefore became scalable. And so I really appreciate the question, because I spent a lot of time thinking about the fact that, you know, Finalis as a business had to first prove the scalability of regulatory infrastructure to unlock all of this immense data value that we are now going to be uniquely positioned to take advantage of on behalf of our users who have obviously entrusted us with that data. And so the way that I think about it is as follows. We're living in a time of incredible inflections as it relates to AI. The horizontal tools that are out there, whether it's Perplexity's Claude or it's OpenAI's ChatGPT, are going to, in my opinion, begin to eat the lunch of many niche vertical software businesses.
Right.
And the reason why is because the models are getting incredibly sophisticated, incredibly advanced, and where good enough models that are addressing 99.5% of use cases for a very reasonable price are going to trump perfect models, or models that more closely approximate perfection, for a significantly higher price from an order of magnitude perspective. A great example is 2 weeks ago, Claude for Finance came out. Claude for Finance entering now a crowded landscape. You've got Hebbia, you've got Rogo, you have a number of other kind of point solution financial services, AI wrapper businesses. I think this is going to create a threat to many of those businesses, because if you are running innovation at a place like Goldman, who are you going to trust, right? And I think fundamentally as a business, we had to think about things like, what is the moat around this business from a data perspective, from a regulatory perspective? What are the network effects that we are uniquely positioned to unlock? And importantly, what is the workflow gravity that we can embed into that user experience so that really we can start to unlock all of this exciting value at different stages of the transaction lifecycle? And so I think it's very much in line with how the industry is evolving and really positioning ourselves to capitalize on the opportunity ahead and not run into a wall when one of these horizontal players, you know, develops the next great model that comes after kind of a captive customer base.
Yeah. I mean, and you touched on a lot of the great points, but I think that it would be hard to say it all on how hard it is to get even in the position you're in, but the amount of nuance around the communication with your clients, around handling their data, around the infrastructure to actually provide the guidance that can be followed. And now you're sitting on this active, live, massive first-party data set. and you get to choose the models you want to work with. You get to choose to fine tune them how you'd like, integrate them in a thoughtful way. And I just like some YC startup, or not to bash YC, but just any kind of pre-seed startup trying to go compete with you. I just don't like, that was like why it was such a no-brainer for me and RLPs. You know, this is such a phenomenal opportunity. I think another thing that was contrary to what I would have thought was your capital efficiency. I mean, I don't know how much you would like to share, but like, you know, for dollar raised to dollar produced in terms of revenue, it's like the cool thing now is Gen AI startups. Oh, you know, we only raised $2 million to get to 5 million in revenue. We raised a Series A in 7 months into our lifespan. Our revenue per employee is 5x higher than the software world. And I'm like, that is great. And I mean, I'm backing those all day, but there's this company Finalis that was doing that before it was cool. So I don't know if you want to share anything there or whatever you're comfortable sharing, but I've found that to be so contrary to the status quo and the norm, and like also something extremely impressive about what you've built.
Well, like so many things in my own founder journey and the company's journey, it was born out of mistakes. So when you leave the legal industry to launch a company, there's a lot of habits you have to unlearn and habits you need to pick up.
Interesting.
And so there's you know, one of the fundamental truths as it relates to Finalis is, yes, we are very capital efficient, but the other side of that story is we were never excellent storytellers of the future that we were building towards, because we hadn't honed that skill.
Right.
And so we were capital efficient by necessity.
Right. It's kind of like this thing, necessity breeds innovation.
Exactly.
And for you, necessity around capital efficiency was like do or die. And so that became something you were extremely strong at because of that.
Yeah. And I think the other aspect of it was that when I left the law firm to launch this business, the initial thought wasn't actually to be a regulatory infrastructure solution. It was actually to be a productivity virtual data room due diligence solution.
So much smaller, kind of honestly, than where you're at now. Like the compliance system of record for private equity, like that is so huge.
Exactly.
Right.
But it you know, like so many startup journeys, you know, a former colleague of mine once referred to it as, you know, smashing your face against the realities of the market. And you know, I
love those kind of quotes. Drag through the glass until you,
chew glass and look into the abyss.
Right.
No one famous said that.
Right.
But I think what is so true about that is that there's some lessons that you can only learn when you're in the arena. We had hundreds of failed sales calls that, of course, were discouraging as it related to the fact that, hey, maybe we had some strong ideas as it related to what was going to work in the market, and ultimately, you know, the market wasn't being receptive to it. But those failed sales calls also educated us as it related to the real opportunities in the market. And so, yes, we were capital efficient. We would have been far more capital efficient had we not required capital to learn through those cycles, and for me, frankly, to also unlearn some bad habits and pick up some good ones, hopefully, along the way. But I think fundamentally, it's more just a reflection of the immense opportunity there is for value accretion in this segment of the market.
Like how badly the market wants this value, that the
100%,
the headwind, no, sorry, tailwind, like pushing you forward. You know, it's not like you're doing a lot of convincing. There's product market fit here.
Exactly. And I'll just give you just like one heuristic, which I find to be helpful, and our team finds to be very helpful as we think about where value sits along the value chain. Today, if you are a managing director at a leading investment bank somewhere in New York, you're lucky if you're taking home 10% of your annual production. So in other words, let's say you generate 10 million in success fees for your investment bank, you may take home $1 million. Right. Now, when you decompose where the remaining $9 million goes, it goes to a number of elements along that chain, right? There's value that's attributed to the origination of the deal.
Right.
There's value that's attributed to the distribution of the deal, and value that's attributed to the execution of the transaction, and some value that's attributable to the back office, right? Legal, compliance, et cetera. we have been able over time to really deeply understand where that value attribution sits. And each point along that chain, that investment banking supply chain, creates tremendous opportunities for innovation.
Right.
And where we are just scratching the surface in that supply chain is by beginning that innovation journey within compliance.
Right.
Because believe it or not, there's a meaningful value attribution within any investment bank as it relates to being the broker-dealer of record and delivering a full-stack compliance solution for the front lines banker. But that's only the beginning, right? You might say that a large investment bank might attribute 5% of the 90% take on compliance. There's a tremendous opportunity to drive automation value across each and every point, each and every link of that supply chain. And that's ultimately the product future for this business.
Yeah, and I mean, it touches on something that I think Finalis illuminates arguably one of the, in the better way out of our whole portfolio, which is this concept, and you hear about it a lot, network effects. Yeah. Like for each action, you get better intelligence. From the better intelligence, you are able to take more decisive action. You know, so in this, it's even bigger than that. That's like in the AI context. You know, each time someone does something, we get better data. We train the model; it's more accurate.
Right.
You know, what starts as vertical becomes horizontal, becomes a system of record. But I think in your case, it's kind of so much bigger than that. I mean, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on the network effect, because we're talking about one of the larger asset classes out there, and you seeing the full spectrum in each point in that decision-making journey. And then you see what works for one banker, how to help the next, and how to automate that, and then apply AI there. I mean, I'm just curious, what network effects have you sort of seen, and how do you articulate those to investors or to clients? Because I found it to be really fascinating when getting to know you and your business.
Yeah. This is the mother of all network effect businesses.
Yeah.
And it really starts with understanding the unique place that licensed, qualified, and respected investment bankers have in this ecosystem. The N equals of investment bankers globally is relatively limited, right? And so you're not going to get a VC, jumping out of the chair excited about the number of potential investment banking users.
Right.
But that's actually not the point, because when you think about the opportunity in aggregating investment banks, and when you think about what investment bankers represent in this ecosystem, investment bankers leverage their credibility, their expertise, their relational capital to effectively engage in market-making activities and unite capital seekers with capital allocators.
Right.
When you bring on an investment bank into Finalis, that investment bank isn't just bringing on their licenses. They're bringing their deal flow into Finalis.
Literally, the opportunities they are considering investing in or passing is now hosted on your platform to remain compliant.
Absolutely. And each transaction has its own atomic unit of value.
Right.
Right? That transaction, this is kind of your classic Andrew Chen solving the cold start problem, right? It's like, what is the efficient way to build supply in anything, right? It's like you find the node. The investment banker is the node. The investment banker aggregates supply into this ecosystem. And let me give you one very practical example of how that's creating interesting flywheel effects. There are approximately 2,000 active deals on the Finalis platform today. They could be capital raises for funds, for corporate issuers. They could be sell-side M&A transactions, secondary trades, and the like. It runs the gamut. Average deal size today is around $75 million. That's obviously a pretty sizable number of active transactions, right?
Right.
That is right up there with leading investment banks as it relates to deal activity and certainly potential energy in terms of deals. Now, what started to happen fairly organically about 5 or 6 months ago was that capital allocators started to approach us directly without us even marketing to them, where they were saying, hey, we have this sense that there's probably a lot of deal flow
that we don't know about.
But
you know about.
That's sitting on the Finalis platform.
Right. It'd be like for me as a general partner of VC, some person or software company somehow was seeing 80-90% of the deal flow out there for pre-seed AI investments. And I'm like, hey, I want access to that. Like, I would love to see that. Yeah. Tell me more.
So think about the immense opportunity that there is for a platform like Finalis to roll out AI that intelligently routes transactions on a fully anonymized and no names basis to best fit capital allocators on the basis of their intent, their mandates.
Right.
2 months into a pilot program with just 100 capital allocators on board, we've already generated 2 LOIs.
Wow.
And that's just the beginning.
And these are 75 million on average in value. So that's, almost could be 150 million in transaction volume from a pilot.
Exactly.
From a pilot, effectively.
Precisely. And so what you're seeing is a classic example of network effects, a flywheel effect, where there's, of course, also meaningful nonlinearity in the revenue opportunity as we begin to drive more and more value. And I think into the investment banking supply chain. And I think there is a really important corollary point, which is the fact that the product roadmap of this business is fully aligned with the incentive structure of our core users, our investment bankers.
Right.
Because what an investment banker wants more than anything is the opportunity to originate quality deal flow, and once won, to distribute that deal flow to close those deals so that they can generate a great result for their clients and by extension for themselves. And that is exactly what we're focused on achieving here.
Yep. Yeah, because it's like, hey, you could have all the best deals and, insights, et cetera, but you're only as good as the capital you can connect that deal to close it out and complete a transaction. And so as you layer in this new offering that you're building, in addition to just driving more AI workflows across that process that you've already been owning, that's just more acceleration to the business moving forward.
Exactly, because that enables us to carve out very significant differentiation in a legacy industry of compliance providers. And fundamentally, it helps in the mind of the banker, our core users, it helps to flip our perception from simply being compliance into actually becoming more of a revenue center powering their business.
Right. Yeah. And it's phenomenal, like that network effect. And that's kind of why I pose this question, because you hear about network effects a lot, but they're usually much narrower around, we sort of got better data than X player over here, so our model's slightly better. But, accuracy can be an edge eroded, like you said, due to the state-of-the-art models. We're going into a world where there's already researchers talking about, these models are starting to make decisions that we don't know how to stop. Like the model could start completing actions that we don't even have control over. So this whole world of AGI that, we could be in a world where AI is that intelligent. So what are you still standing on at the end is owning a workflow, owning a data set, and being a trusted accelerator, which is what you're building into with your AI angle.
Yeah, totally. And to be clear, that trusted acceleration isn't just acceleration of unlocking liquidity in the private markets. We think that has to happen first because you need to prove the value.
That's your entry point to the banker.
But that's the entry point, not just to the banker, but to the broader ecosystem.
Right.
And so you can talk about liquidity flywheels, which was the example I just shared, but you can also talk about data flywheels.
Right.
Right. What are the opportunities to win the trust of the broader ecosystem and by extension be able to not just unlock liquidity, but collect more data that enables you to deliver even better AI products?
Right. Yep. That makes sense. Before I lose the thought, you talked about being a lawyer to a founder and things you had to unlearn, things you had to learn for the first time. Walk us through that. I don't know too many people who Harvard educated were
this should be something stronger.
Yeah. Bar certified.
Yeah.
Kind of actually worked at top tier law firm. You had a head of product role I saw for a while at one point, multiple degrees. And, so you've lived many different lives and now you're at this intersection of tech CEO, AI native CEO, and lawyer. Walk us through that. Curious, like from childhood till now, like when did you know you wanted to be a founder? And then sort of when in the journey were you like, I'm going to be a tech CEO when you had already been a lawyer, which is kind of uncommon, although it's really cool.
Yeah, great question. So I would say that my calling was never actually to be a founder. Like
Interesting.
I'm not sure that.
Is a real thing like Mark Cuban. Oh, I was selling Kool-Aid when I was,
Yeah,
a lot, you hear all these founder stories. That's why I always like to ask from childhood.
I think the one thing that's always driven me is a desire to create impact.
Yeah, value for the world.
Exactly. And so that's really what drove, kind of my journey through academia, where I spent a lot of time in academia, as you noted.
Yeah.
My journey ultimately into a world-class law firm where I was able to get exposure to some of the best attorneys in the world to work on some of the most impactful private market deals in the world, and ultimately into Finalis. I think a lot about leverage.
Right.
What are the opportunities that for me to uniquely contribute
To society, right?
in my short time on this earth? And if you think about the fact that ultimately it is a huge commitment, the things that you choose to focus your energy on during your waking hours, and you want to make sure, at least for me, that it's time that where I feel fully leveraged in the work that I'm doing. And so ultimately my decision to leave the practice of law to launch my own business had a lot less to do with the law firm itself, and the practice of law itself, more than it had to do with how I felt about myself engaging in that activity. What I really wanted was to feel like I was fully leveraging myself, that I was bringing more of myself to the table every day. And I just found that the opportunity to build this business was creating opportunities for me to exercise that leverage, where I felt that I had to sit at the nexus of legal and regulatory and technology and AI as we started to build this solution out. And that leverage also creates a dynamic where I feel like I'm learning new things every day. I feel like I'm challenged every day. And that ultimately is what motivates me to bring my best to what I do. It helps that we're operating in a great market,
Right.
a market opportunity that's huge, where the opportunities to innovate are huge, and where the go-to-market strategy required there to be a team that came from a legal mindset. Because the first thing that we needed to prove was the scalability of regulatory infrastructure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can relate to what on the just how you kind of came into the. I mean, we have very different backgrounds. I don't have any advanced degrees. Went to a state school, but I mean, similar in the sense of like, hey, with the limited time I have on this earth, I want to help as many people and leave a positive impact and contribute to innovation. So many founders need capital out there and they need someone to believe in them, and sometimes even before it's logical to do so. And I think that's, to me, one of the beautiful things about venture capital. And it's again, different angle on this concept of like making the most use out of your time, but I can definitely relate to that. And you bring up kind of transitioning to this point I wanted to talk about around leadership and culture.
Yeah.
And hiring, finding the right talent. Like in your business, like it is very specific. Like you have AI, you have big data, you have compliance. What's that been like for you? Like building out an AI team, building out a compliance team. How do you sort of navigate that landscape? Because you hear that a lot from founders. Like one of the hardest things is like who you hire, who you keep, who you don't keep. So like how have you been able to navigate all that? Because kind of when you started out, like you said, you were just kind of an attorney. Now how many employees are you? Like 100 and.
We're a little over 100 today.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure you have some pretty clear insights on how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say I would kind of connect this back to the notion of, I've learned every lesson there is to learn as a startup founder. I often tell my colleagues that I feel like Finalis today is my third startup because we've been through a few iterations since we launched the business, at least my third startup, maybe my fourth at this point. And the journey around developing an eye for talent, understanding when to invest in talent or when perhaps the moment for a given profile has come and gone.
Right.
I think one of the most ruthless aspects of startup life is that the startup is evolving very quickly, and it is incumbent on each professional to evolve as quickly or faster than the startup.
Slightly ahead, right? Right. Anticipate where it's going versus being dragged there.
Precisely. And I think as a consequence to that, sometimes it has less to do with the individual and more to do with just the moment that the company is in.
Right.
That individual's set of skills, because I'm one of those glass half full people that believes that everybody has
Which is
a
like
set of skills to offer.
It's like a core thing of being a founder is like you have to be that way. You have to be optimistic, great at listening, able to change your mind, but you have to say, I'm going to create a reality that's so much different than the world today. I'm going to fill that gap. That's like a core attribute. But
it was on some reel that my wife shared with me earlier today. It was somebody was characterizing as the difference between empathy and compassion, right? And it's important as a founder to be compassionate, but empathetic. Being too empathetic can sometimes lead you down the wrong path.
right.
But I think that fundamentally what we look for at Finalis are people who are unafraid of making decisions. We have this huge push within the business to drive decision making as far down the enterprise as possible, because that ultimately unlocks leverage at scale, not just for the executive leadership team, but for the management team. And so we apply the kind of infamous Jeff Bezos framework to decision making, where reversible decisions, go for it, don't need to ask permission. If it's an irreversible position, that's where you start to involve senior leaders,
Right.
so that we can move faster and really work to manifest the opportunity in front of us. And that is not for everyone, right? I want to be clear, like that level of speed of execution doesn't necessarily jive with a lot of people. And so we've gotten better and better at being able to, in our screening,
Detect
that. Obviously, you need to have some domain exposure and domain expertise.
But that's not all you need.
But I would say that's kind of the price of entry. That's an expectation.
That just gets you on the call, right? The first call or down that funnel, that just gets you in the door.
Now, I think that one of the other interesting lessons learned, and I'm sure that some of your other portfolio companies can speak to this, is fundamentally what we're doing at Finalis is we're deconstructing an analog industry and reconstructing it. And that process of deconstruction and reconstruction requires a unique set of skills and attributes. On the one hand, you have systems thinking, right? The ability to kind of break things down to their component parts and maybe rearrange them. But the other aspect of it is a creative mindset that enables you to look at a problem from a variety of different prisms to ultimately understand how it might be decomposed. And one of the lessons that I learned early on was that if we were just looking, for example, at former investment bankers and expecting them to understand how to decompose this market, that might not actually be the best place to start.
Right.
Because if you're too deep in your workflows, you can be a little myopic about how to achieve that. Now, not to say that doesn't exist, right? But I fundamentally believe that a lawyer like myself might have been in a better position to identify opportunities to decompose these particular workflows within investment banking, then maybe I would have been able to effectively decompose legal workflows. Because you're adjacent to the market, you know enough to be dangerous, but you are not so deeply entrenched in the market that you struggle to decompose it.
Yeah, I mean this is such a fascinating topic. I was having on another podcast episode a different founder, Margarita, the CEO of AirVolta, and they're building the data center management software of the future and powering like some of the largest data centers in the world and they're like a 4-person startup. And they're using AI as like a co-pilot to detect issues before they even happen and help fix those issues, and then just way smarter intelligence on the data center. But that was like one of the key things we talked about, and I feel like there could be a whole book written on this, but like how do you listen to the customer and how do you detect what needs to be built and how do you know when to change your mind, but like not let them tell you what to build? Like how do you make that delineation, especially her company's much younger. I don't even know if they're a year old yet. But like, so it's, different part of their journey. But that, I think this concept's so fascinating. Like what you said, because I was a lawyer, not a banker, I could almost see how to make this banker's life 10x better than they could even see themselves. But I had to listen to them and then decide what to build. Like that skill set, I feel like is one of the core things of being a successful entrepreneur. Because if you just make something slightly better, you're not going to have a big successful business. It has to actually be so much better than the status quo by default. You have to reimagine something that isn't even there yet.
Well, yeah, and look at the other AI companies that are innovating for financial services. Many of those businesses are automating, the production of things like investment banking artifacts. But if you were to talk to a senior managing director of a bank, their number one pain point is not the manufacturing of investment banking artifacts. It's about engaging in this market making activity that we're working to manifest. It's about getting access to better data so that they can make more informed decisions on opportunities for their clients, to win better business, to identify that best fit capital allocator. And so I really think that this outside in view, puts us in a position of driving significant value where it's most impactful.
Yeah, that makes sense. And another thing too, so I don't lose that thought, but like on the recruiting side, you're kind of talking about you need to have agency, you need to make decisions independently. We want to entrust in you the most autonomy possible. But if it's a decision we can't get out of as a business, we need to talk about it. How do you kind of, because I've hired 30, 40, maybe 50 people, something in that range, and some of them didn't work. Some did really, really well. And across all levels, like leadership down to individual contributors out of college. So I guess like for you, when you're recruiting, you've hired a lot of people. How do you know somebody has that? As a CEO, you probably are involved in the majority of the hiring or at least big roles. Like, how do you know very quickly so you don't waste your time? If you're giving that tips for recruiting to other founders, like how do you know someone has that ability to make decisions, collaborate, and work autonomously and stay slightly ahead of the business and anticipate what it needs versus being dragged along?
It's interesting. I oftentimes start my interviews by turning the tables, and I start by asking the candidate if they have any questions for me.
And it tells you a lot about where their head's at. Like, what do they think is the most important question to ask first with their limited time with the CEO?
Exactly. And so if they haven't prepared, if they ask about some kind of high-level generic
how
thing
many
about the
days
business,
can I work in the office versus remote? Right.
that says a lot.
Right.
That says a lot about if that's how they're showing up in an interview.
I love that. Yeah. Versus like they're like asking one of the most important things you're thinking about, and they have a thesis on how to solve it even. Then it's like, wow, this person's like anticipating, they understand the business, they're passionate, and they're good at business. Like, yeah.
And it's just a very simple frame. It's a very simple litmus test to understand what kind of a person, what kind of a professional are you talking to. Our current VP of Finance, when he was interviewing, and I don't think he'll mind me kind of sharing this story, he had prepared with the limited information that he had about the business, an entire plan for how he would effectively build our systems and processes in our corporate finance function. And he did that proactively. He just pinged me and he said, "Hey, Fed, there's something that I want to show you. I've really enjoyed the conversations.
Check it out." Right.
Yeah, here's what I put together. And that builds a ton of confidence in if this is the way that this person is going to show up in an interview process.
Imagine when you plug them into the system.
Imagine when you actually plug them into the system.
Right.
And so, I do look for that because ultimately that's the kind of energy we need in this business.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like great candidates, very successful people in their career know this. Maybe people that are figuring it out still or haven't gotten there is like a CEO needs to depend on you. they want to hear your opinion and they want to know that they can share back the feedback and you can be influenced and
Right.
collaborate, but they're looking for ownership and they're looking for someone who drives the business versus just sitting in a seat being driven. And it's like this, your finance leader sounds like somebody who, and it can be hard because you don't want to go in too heavy handed and be like, let me tell you how to run your own company. I'm a candidate. You have to have humility with it and people
Sure.
skills. But, CEOs are looking for drivers who are accountable and anticipating and looking to evolve things to a higher level than where they're at. And it's like folks in their career should really strive for that. I don't know if you'd add anything.
I completely agree. And what I can also just say is that we as a business are working to build a culture, which I think is a continuous process, where we celebrate the decision, the fact that the decision was made,
right.
that people didn't sit on the status quo.
Right.
That if somebody, because there's, in a startup, a million things are broken all the time,
Right.
And if you're going to continue to grow and you're going to continue to scale at this unnatural pace, things are going to break. But what you want is you want people at every level of the company to take it upon themselves to observe that something is broken and ultimately come to the table with a set of solutions.
Right.
And those who are just going to accept the status quo and not take the courageous step of actually raising their hand and saying, hey, there's a problem here. Let's work to drive attention, energy around building a solution for it. Those are the people that we ultimately want to celebrate and hold up as our heroes, even when they get it wrong.
Right.
Because they're going to get it wrong from time to time. But I would rather that some mistakes get made along the way
Than just doing nothing at all.
than just being complacent and not doing anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's in this past week, I'm a football fan, so I was watching an old episode. My brother was with me this past weekend, and he logged in his HBO account. So I don't have HBO, and I got to watch the Cincinnati Bengals sort of coach talking a lot about different things. And at one point he talks about it's not about the result of the decision; it's about how the decision was made, and we
Yep.
celebrate the process of making decisions here. And then in the same kind of number of days, I heard Jameis Winston. He got a lot of riff on Twitter about it, but he's like, it's not about the outcome of the decision. It's I'm constantly asking myself as the quarterback of the offense, am I making decisions in the right way? It's less about did the decision work or not. Am I accounting for all the right variables? And then I guess in a business setting, translating this is like you have to get people comfortable to be the quarterback. Everyone needs to be the quarterback, comfortable to make a decision. The O lineman, the receiver.
Exactly.
It can't just be you as the CEO because that's a way you're going to fail culturally.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Could not agree more.
Yeah, very cool. So I wanted to ask you this. I have a couple of questions around building Finalis. One of them was this question of how far can you push the edge of AI and compliance, the system of record for private equity? What does the frontier look like? I mean, we talked about deal matching. We talked about insights to make better decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, as intelligence improves and these models keep improving in their capabilities, I mean, what do you think the world of Finalis could look like in 5 or 10 years? Or it could even be more sooner. I'm just curious, kind of anything you're iterating on internally that you're excited about or things on your mind about the future.
Yeah, I think, one way to maybe anchor my response to that is if you think about kind of the archetype of an investment bank, right? A skyscraper somewhere on Wall Street. Our fundamental belief is that skyscraper is no longer Wall Street's final form. Wall Street's final form is actually an individual like you or me on their laptop leveraging a platform in the cloud and all of the automation that comes with that. That is Wall Street's final form. And that final form is going to enable a massive democratization as it relates to capital seekers being able to connect with willing capital through qualified investment bankers, not just in the US, but globally. Because fundamentally, what automation is really beginning to drive is it's compressing transaction cycle times. If you think about the classical M&A sell-side transaction could take 200 days or more to close. but there's tremendous opportunities at each point along that chain to drive compression. We started with compliance, right? We started dramatically reducing compliance cycle times. It wasn't unheard of in the legacy industry. It is not unheard of for bankers to be waiting for weeks for engagement letters to be approved for distribution or marketing materials to be reviewed. This is what the legacy industry has grown accustomed to. And so we started this digital transformation journey, and we started unlocking the opportunities for automation within compliance, because that is kind of this critical wedge that catalyzes all of this incredible downstream opportunity. But that's really just the beginning. Now, how far can you take compliance? Your original question, pretty far. Obviously, it is important for the regulator to be able to tie back key decisions to qualified and licensed individuals that we have at Finalis and that you might be able to find at other investment banks around the world. But how much automation can that compliance professional leverage in order to render quality decisions is an area where we're still in the very early innings of.
Yep.
Right. Clearly, you can unlock and use automation for things like email surveillance, brokerage account surveillance, marketing material reviews, and the like. But we are actively exploring other applications and other opportunities for that automation. And we're engaging with the regulator all along the way, because, even just yesterday, we met with a series of executives with the regulator to talk through the immense opportunities for automation here, where we are really seeking to be thought partners with the regulator as it relates to, okay, well, what are the components? What are the core workflows where it's important for a human being to deliver the final stamp of approval? What is the level of consistency and quality that you need to be able to see in these models in order to enable the entire decision-making process to be fully leveraging artificial intelligence? And so, we're positioning ourselves right there as we drive these conversations, because we are living these, we're effectively in the throes of being able to experiment and validate opportunities for automation here.
In a compliant fashion, right?
In a compliant fashion, obviously, but all along the way, beyond that, is the opportunity to drive automation across other core component parts of this investment banking supply chain.
Yep.
And so, we will continue to drive up, the opportunities for automation in a way that raises the standard for compliance in the industry as it relates to our compliance value props. But as it relates to all of this other downstream product value, we're very excited to drive additional value creation there. It'll compress the transaction timeline, and it's also, frankly, going to squeeze a lot of the fat out of the investment banking process in the private markets to really unlock and enable this opportunity for the future of the investment bank to potentially just be one person leveraging a platform.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of very powerful things, but I mean, just distilling it down, it's the future of Wall Street. It's a banker, a laptop, and access to deal flow and capital all as an individual. Like, it's more and more democratized, and AI, where that fits in, is compressing the time for a deal to be from start to finish, and allowing that individual banker to run Wall Street or be a big player in Wall Street. Like, that is the trend. And I think a question on this point, I have friends in different types of companies, and I mean, we have like a few things going on, and I love talking to you about this kind of stuff, like the macro. Like, we have David Sachs, this crypto czar. We have the Trump family sort of caring a lot about crypto.
Yep.
We have different individuals influencing AI policy now. We're bringing chips manufacturing back home. There's more testing to get away from just reliance on what I heard was Palantir. Like, there's new budget set aside, I think, in the billions to test there. Mm-hmm. There's maybe less talk, but I have different sort of inside knowledge of different companies actually working with lobbyists in the finance or regulatory fields to sort of influence the policy. I'm curious, like, how Finalis or how you were thinking about that. Like, how do you interact? Because you mentioned regulators is where I'm getting at here, but How do you think about that? Like, how do you drive thought leadership around AI capabilities in Washington and then do that in a way that, builds great credibility and trust? I mean, I don't think that's really talked about on the internet that much besides when people see the policy stuff getting updated on Twitter.
So in 2021, we were a very young business. We actually attended as an early stage startup, a hyper early stage startup.
Were you like 5 people, 6 people?
Yeah, it was, you could count on two hands. We attended FINRA's annual conference in DC. And what was fascinating about that initial conference that we attended was that you could also count on one hand the number of tech companies that were there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I will not name them, but many of the companies that were there from a defensive posture perspective.
They shall remain unnamed.
They were there because they were looking to, and this is an assertion, but I think that that's probably borne out, they were looking to rehabilitate their image with the regulator.
Right.
From day zero, we've taken a very different approach. We recognize that there's an immense opportunity for us to lean in to the relationship with the regulator, where we've openly told the regulator, that the regulator is coming in maybe once a year to
so
do
they
an
do
annual,
come in and they look at the stack, the data.
coming in virtually.
I see, yeah.
But the conversation has been more around, well, why isn't this real time? This could be in real time API feed.
From their side?
No, from
Or your side?
from us as a regulated business into the regulator.
Right. And what have they said to that?
Well, I think that what that underscores is that there's an incredible opportunity for technology to significantly raise the standards for compliance
Right.
in this market, right? Where
So it's more compliant and it's faster. It's two value props. It's more compliant, so protecting, interested parties, their affected parties, and then it's also making a deal go along quicker because it's more automation.
Absolutely. And automation is not going to be the panacea, right? It's
Right.
not going to solve all problems. But we really think that to innovate in this space, you need to start from the perspective of recognizing that what the regulator is looking to really accomplish here is to protect investors,
Right.
right? That is fundamentally the mission.
Like
of the
they're at the
regulator.
table for that one purpose.
Exactly. And so in order to achieve that objective and recognizing that there's an incredible opportunity to modernize rules such that it's easier for folks to participate in all of this incredible opportunity in the private markets, which is aligned with some of the more recent regulatory changes that you're starting to see around crypto and blockchain.
Yeah. Also like more different types of LPs being allowed in funds at a higher number, like qualified versus accredited. That I believe shifted up in the Big Beautiful Bill. I think you can have more accredited investors. There's a higher AUM threshold. This isn't financial advice.
Yeah.
Consult your attorney and tax advisors. But I mean, that is the trend, is to democratize more, allow even citizens participating in VC world.
And
is
with
shifting.
that comes increased opportunities for folks to get taken advantage of.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're not versed in that asset class and decision making. So like now the regulators, they should be like, oh, we got to, we need to be really careful here. This policy puts more onus on us to set clear parameters.
And so, the perception that I take from these interactions with the regulator is that they are fundamentally focused and grappling on very challenging issues. How do you create more openness in this ecosystem and then lean into automation to actually raise the standard of compliance for everybody involved? And so to that end, we as a business are very committed to working hand in hand with the regulator to help them navigate the very significant rule modernization push that is currently underway, not just here in the United States, I want to be clear, but globally as well among foreign regulators. And so we're excited to have an opportunity to be at that table and to inform on that evolution.
I wanted to ask you, because you brought it up globally, and it's this question sort of adjacent. There's different talk from different parties around Europe and other international markets might have their time in the sun. They might outpace the U.S. in terms of growth. Like we're going international. I guess what's your view on that on the macro? Like, do you think, because you're sitting on this like treasure trove of data on deal making. Like, do you think now's the time to be more heavy-handed in international markets? I mean, I guess I'm curious what you're seeing there because I've seen pretty credible people talking about that, and I found it fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's pretty good price to earnings arbitrage in Europe today relative to the United States.
Even in private markets, right?
Absolutely. And so you're starting to see a more meaningful influx of private capital going into European businesses.
Right.
And so clearly, to us, what that represents is an incredible opportunity to be more active in European markets. And we are actively exploring opportunities to extend our operations as a platform in continental Europe as well as in the United Kingdom. Ultimately, the opportunity that we see, back to that one individual with a laptop and a platform, is the platform to, in a compliant way, provide access to investors and issuers anywhere in the world where you want to engage in a private markets transaction. There are regulations that are quite heavy and onerous in places like the European Union, the UK, Singapore, et cetera. And we want to effectively build that regulated infrastructure to unlock that opportunity. The US only accounts for about 40% of global private market deal flows, right? Only 40%. And the growth, for as much as the US has shown very promising growth, there's tremendous growth outside of the US borders. And so we obviously want to play and our relevance into all those markets where you see that growth.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had never even quite till today pictured that for Finalis, and it makes complete sense. Like being this global ecosystem that's country agnostic to buy and sell companies of all sizes and remain compliant and streamline that process. I mean, that is such a huge opportunity. And I mean, I can tell you, so like for my AI Fund 1, I have an investment in Singapore. I have one in Italy. I have 2 investments in Germany, one from the fund, one outside of the fund. I have one in the UK. And the entry prices compared to traction and the de-risked opportunities, I mean, the alpha is insane. I mean, there was one already. They're getting it all done, but we're looking at like an 8x markup, so 800% markup.
Wow.
In like 6 months. So, but if we had taken the same startup with the same traction, the same moment of time, and they were based in the Bay, maybe our markup would have been 2x because they would have raised.
Sure.
Maybe there wouldn't even have been one. We would have paid the Series A price at the seed round. So
absolutely.
As a VC, I mean, I am constantly scouting deals outside of this. And on top of all that, AI's leveled the playing field. Like China has around half of the world's leading researchers anyways. And I think you don't have to be from Stanford or the US to be a top AI native company. It can come from Italy. You can come from the UK. You can come from Poland. You can come from many different nooks and crannies. And so I've been really heavy handed on that. And I think it matches like your thesis and what you're seeing on the private equity side.
I mean, you're a great reflection of, the courage to chase that alpha.
Yeah, in this deal, I was the first U.S. investor on their cap table at the seed, and the 8x deal I'm talking about.
Yeah, and so I do think that in fact, there was some great data that came out from Carta just a few months ago that talked about how fund ones are meaningfully outperforming. Kind of more mature fund vintages.
Do you think that's because their funds are bigger and they take less risk and they're putting in bigger checks? Or do you think it's because we earn the right to exist as fund one managers? We have better, maybe arguably better access or a better insight or a better thesis? Or do you think it's just because we're writing smaller checks? Because I've always tried to play devil's advocate with those posts, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this kind of connects back to kind of the way that I think about forging great partnerships with investors in Finalis is I feel like as a founder, I always do better and there's always a better fit with the investor when that investor sees their fund as a startup too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the common points made is like, if I'm a 10 billion, 5 billion AUM firm and I put $1 million into Finalis, 2 million, let's just be honest, I don't give a shit really what happens. I have $10 billion under my management. You are purely a signal to me. Will you grow? Will you teach me something? Will I put real money into you later? But by default, if you fell from just a math point of view, maybe I like you as a person, we're friends, whatever, but
Right.
Mathematically, you're irrelevant to me.
Right.
And I don't think founders actually get that. Like at pre-seed, if I was raising money, I would go with angels and operators and small funds that they will do whatever they can to see you succeed because their success is aligned with yours. It's just incentives. And I think a lot of top AI companies don't actually understand that. Like they think, oh, it's the big brand name. I got Mr. or Mrs. X from Y here, top 20 fund. And like that has benefits. I'm not knocking that at all. But first money in or really early money in, that fund's capital just won't, it by default doesn't mean that much to them. And they're just trying to get a signal from you.
Yeah.
And they won't spend time with you like a small firm would or an angel.
We have a rule as a business, no passive money allowed.
Right. Like literally, like
And
none.
yeah, and that's I tell people straight up. It's like we are not interested in passive capital investment.
Because it's just money at that point doesn't do anything for you. There's no inherent value.
No, we're still living at a time where money is still relatively cheap, right?
And you work in the money world. So
exactly.
you know
so
a lot of people
it's
who...
not really about that,
Right.
It's what it's about is forging the right types of partnerships with those investors that are ultimately going to help us accelerate these very meaningful liquidity and data flywheels that we see in the market.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's why I love working with you because I felt like from the first time we met, we were aligned on how can we help each other? How can we help with talent or insights or fundraising strategies, whatever it may be? Like, how do I actually augment my network, my time to be a value add to you? And like on this same podcast I was talking about with Margarita that we did recently, it's like the best founders seek out that help because you can't help someone who doesn't want it. And you'd be surprised how many founders like don't necessarily get the full leverage out of their investors. So I love that you do that.
Right. I appreciate that. No, we've had a great and really enjoyed our partnership with Banyan. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, kind of wrapping up here, rapid fire, and then we'll close this out. What are you most excited about the next 1 to 2 years inside of the business?
Well, we're seeing two key inflections in this business, and getting to the other side of those inflections is what gets me really excited. The first is our opportunity to drive very meaningful aggregation in investment bankers, deal flow, and data in this segment of the market. We are just getting the engines roaring as it relates to those go-to-market motions, and so really excited to drive that because as I mentioned, that's what catalyzes all of this downstream opportunity. The second thing that I'm really excited about is layering on this exciting expansion AI product on top of our compliance-based product. I think what we've proven over the course of the last several years is an opportunity to build a really great compliance product. I think what we have yet to prove and what we intend to prove over the course of the next couple of years is the incredible opportunity that we uniquely have now to roll out exciting AI that unlocks very significant value, not just for investment bankers, but for other stakeholders in this ecosystem.
Excellent. On this, one thing now that you wish you would have known at the start of the company, what's like the one thing? It could be departing that wisdom onto other founders or LPs or investors or just for your own journey. What's like the one thing you kind of wish you knew back then that you know now very clearly?
This is easy for me. Do not commit to writing one line of code until you have people throwing money at you, desperate to see the product solution.
So you kind of got in a position where that burned you a bit, like built things way ahead of confirming someone would pay or that they need it.
We built a whole product before we had product market fit.
Talk about that. I mean, this is the stuff on the pod under the banyan tree, like that I feel like is not talked about enough. Like, how did that happen? What did you learn from that?
It happened because I had just left a law firm and I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
I had so much conviction that the product idea that
Had to
I
be
had
this vision, this way of working.
exactly, and I kind of allowed myself to get lost in that vision, and ultimately, threw some good money after bad to build something that fundamentally no one wanted.
Right.
And there are zero excuses to fall into that trap today when you have things like Lovable, where you can
Vibe code it up, right?
you can vibe code it up and you can put it in front of prospective customers and you can get their reactions.
Right.
I think, starting all over again, I would have worked the sales angle, effectively marketed the product as images, and worked to validate the solution to the point where,
There's almost like paid pilot sign and then you go build it.
exactly.
Right.
And so, but that's, those are lessons that you learn the hard way.
You can hear it on a podcast, but until you live it, it's like probably not going to be as real to you.
Exactly. It's, but I would say that was, easily the number one lesson learned in my own journey.
Okay. Last one, and then we'll wrap up. What's your one controversial hot take on AI that's just like bugging you that you just want to get off your chest? Like, I feel like everyone kind of has one, but would love to hear yours.
I think a lot of vertical AI businesses are going to get crushed over the next 2 to 3 years by the horizontal platforms like OpenAI.
Are you willing to name any names or no examples?
No, but I think many of them are in financial services. I think they're going to get crushed.
Right. How do we know as an investor they're in that bucket in your view? Is it that they're too light on the workflow, or that that's probably that, right? The workflow they're owning is just too light. There's low switching cost.
Well, there's a few things. Is there a data moat?
Okay, data moat.
Is there workflow gravity?
Yep.
Are there network effects?
And it's like if you don't have all three of those in your view, you're at risk of being replaced in the next.
And ideally, is there a regulatory wall built around this business? Those are probably the four.
Right.
And I would argue you need at least 2, arguably 3, to survive the onslaught of competition that's going to come from these horizontal platforms.
Wow.
That's my view.
That is, I like it a lot. I mean, it's not too indifferent than what I have as a heuristic for my decision making, but I think it's more informed for your world of compliance and financial services, because you're saying you need data moat, meaning you access data that no other provider can or very few. You need a workflow moat, meaning you own workflows that no other or very few can own. You have a compliance barrier that makes it so not anyone can just go do this. And what was the fourth one?
So it's workflow, it's data, it's network effects, and it's
network effects, right? Like your business can do multiple things at once and be a system of record versus just a point solution.
Or where the number of customers and the amount of data on the platform actually is self-reinforcing and fuels really interesting flywheels in different ways.
Right, like for you, compressing deal time from start to finish, making better decisions, and matchmaking are all these network effects.
Exactly right.
Awesome. Well, Federico, thank you so much.
Sam, thanks for having me. Look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
All right, take care.